You know what? The podcast listeners are getting some bonus exclusive content.
Okay.
Because the camera's being a bit lazy. I can't connect to it. It's being shit.
Well,
Something went wrong.
Really impatient with technology. Like, one thing goes wrong and you
I'm
just
looking at the wrong bit. That's why. I nearly read out my password then.
Well done.
And then anyone could hack into our camera.
And see disturbing sights.
Two people trying to podcast responsibly. It's going to go blip, 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 blip in a minute. Blip, 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 blip. What time is it?
Showtime.
Hello.
That to go outside.
Way too much time, if you ask me.
8 minutes to be exact. Oh, was that the joke that you were making as well?
What joke?
Time.
Before what?
The thing that I said.
What thing did... What?
Well, you're rolling today.
Who pinged?
Stop pinging. Oh dear. Let's not start that up again. Shall we just get into it?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're in a fit state to do a podcast at the moment, but let's try anyway.
When are we ever?
Oh, pardon me. Mushy pea
certainly
farts.
Oh dear.
Happy birthday to
Shut
me.
up. No, I'm doing the intro. Hello Internet, I'm Firebolt.
And I'm the Orbiter.
Okay. And it's a very special day today.
Very.
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 Because you're now 3 times older than me.
Yeah.
Stop begging.
Our age ratio matches our intelligence ratio now.
Perhaps reversed.
How very dare you.
I would offer to sing Happy Birthday, but I can't sing at the best of times, and I've already had a beer, so I shan't make your ears bleed. Dear listeners. Oh wait, I just went and did it.
You did what? Okay.
you don't seem exactly intact at the moment.
I'm knackered. It's my birthday today, and I had a gig all last night. I didn't get home till 2:00 in the morning, and I've been out all day today doing another gig.
But you have to get up at 7 tomorrow.
I know, but I just thought, fuck it, let's just do the thing. Let's take some.
There's not really enough time to do it.
Time is our enemy. They say time is the fire in which we burn.
Okay, well, do you want to go on to the news?
You have no idea what I'm talking about, do you?
Do you want to go onto the
Well, I'm going to revisit
times first, the current times.
Okay, well, I suppose, yeah. Stop heckling, audience.
We have a couple of people sitting in the room.
Star Stuff is working away, as usual, on the sofa. But my mum is
Maestro.
Is in the audience, in the sofa audience.
Maestro.
Yes, okay. For now.
Yeah.
She might get bored and bugger off to bed at some point.
Okay, I can't remember what's happened since the last time we did one, but that doesn't really change.
Well, the last
one before I went away?
No, the last one. I'm trying to remember.
No, it wouldn't have been.
I think it was a couple of days before the Supreme Court ruling.
Oh yeah, that's what's happened since.
That was the start of what's happened since.
Also, impeachment proceedings.
Impeachment.
Are you okay?
No, I'm not.
How much have you had?
Of what? Life. 48 years.
Oh dear. That's dangerous. Oh, Jesus, you fired again, didn't you?
That was ages ago. Maybe it was a time-travelling fart. It left my anus at such velocity that it hurled into the future.
Light speed farts.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so...
What?
What do you think's actually going to happen with this Brexit malarkey?
I don't know. I have no idea.
No, but does
anyone else?
No. I mean, the government, who's headed by someone who was repeatedly fired specifically for lying, is now saying that it won't ask... Wait, no. It's saying that it will ask for an extension and follow the law.
Funnily enough, what I said...
We'll be leaving on the...
I said our last episode was just before the Supreme Court ruling on the proroguing of Parliament being illegal. By the time this episode goes out, Parliament will have been prorogued again.
Are they not able to stop that, though?
Well, no, it's a standard minimum proroguing this time for the actual Queen's speech. It's the length of time that it really should have been in the first place. It's happening on Tuesday, and then the Queen's speech is the following.
Queen's speech shouldn't be happening.
I don't know what the rules are on that.
Well, there's not really set out rules as far as I'm aware. It's more just protocol.
Parliament has been in session for quite a long time, comparatively. There's been more than 2
years. Go on
years.
holiday all the bloody fucking time, so they can...
all the bloody fucking time. Is that like...
I'm sure they could sit down and do their jobs at this fucking time. They can have the holiday afterwards, but...
Well, what's different about now from usual?
Well,
they can't do their job normally.
What?
They can't do their job normally, so why would they be able to now?
I suppose so. But I mean, some of them do their job. Maybe.
I don't know. I think, I mean, obviously he wants to blame Europe and Parliament for not getting Brexit through at the end of October. I don't think we're going to have a no-deal situation at the end of October, at least.
I think there's going to be a legal paradox.
Do explain.
Well... If he...
Is it anything like a temporal paradox? Because I love those Star Trek episodes.
No. If he can't get a deal through, which he almost certainly will not be able to.
Yeah.
And then ask the EU for an extension, but given that the reason that we were given the last extension was to have a democratic vote that would sort all this out, and we didn't...
Yeah, that wasn't the reason.
That was the conditions on which France accepted it.
Was it?
They were pushing...
In general, we were just told to use the time wisely.
Donald Tusk said that, but right. France were quite adamant that we'd have to use it to actually do something meaningful.
Yeah.
But we haven't really. We've got a new Prime Minister, but they weren't voted in.
Yeah.
And, well, actually, that's why a Queen's speech now... would be quite unusual.
I suppose that does constitute a meaningful change of some sort. Having a new Prime Minister that hasn't been voted in is a fairly big change.
It's a fairly big change, but it's not something that actually takes into account anything that people want.
There has also been a meaningful change in terms of the deal that was already agreed has been thrown out and he started again.
Well, it's been made even more unacceptable to Parliament because now...
But it's been a change. It's been a meaningful change.
Yeah. Now, instead of putting Northern Ireland security up in the air, it puts it definitely, just out, basically. I think the idea is to basically shaft responsibility onto anyone but the government.
Sounds familiar.
So they've now said, we can have this solution to the backstop, but the Northern Irish Assembly has to vote on it every 4 years.
Under normal circumstances, I would say you do know that by the time this goes out, it's always going to be out of date at the moment. But then there's not much going to happen really with this beyond Tuesday, other than...
Well, they might say that they can't prorogue Parliament again, because he specifically promised the courts that he wouldn't prorogue Parliament again.
Yeah, I don't know. It'd be worth keeping a watch on, isn't it? It's the episodes aren't getting any more boring, are they?
No.
But in any case, I don't think a deal's going to go through. I don't think there's going to be a no deal on the 31st of October, at least. I think he's deliberately setting up a situation where it has to be extended, the deadline has to be extended again, so that there can be a general election, and betting on the fact that he will win a majority with that and be able to then force through whatever.
I think his first strategy failed catastrophically, and now he's panicking, flailing about, doing whatever he can to get into a better position of power.
I don't know. It's like chess, isn't it? But basically,
an extension actually happening on the 31st would probably make him more popular with voters. So I think that's ultimately what he's going to run down the clock to. And then blame it on everyone else and say, vote for me, I'll change it next time.
Kind of annoys me how it all comes down to when the words like statecraft come out and stuff like that. It's like, it's not a fucking art form messing with people's lives.
Mr. Dominic Cummings. But also worrying is that recently it looks, and I don't know if any of this has been confirmed yet, like he's been having talks with Hungary's foreign minister.
Yeah, you mentioned that this morning.
And Hungary has been bandied about by some of the pundits as possibly who we might use to back us up if we wanted to go for no deal and our own parliament wouldn't let us.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Is if Europe does refuse an extension, then
Well, I think what they're
there's no
banking
way
on
to
is
kind of-
Hungary refusing
Yeah.
it. Because then he
Well,
will
yeah,
have
but
fulfilled
that-
his legal obligation
that would be
to
the same
ask for an
thing.
extension.
that would be the same thing because they would veto it. That would mean Europe as a whole would refuse it.
But it doesn't mean that they've refused it independently, and there may be issues with collusion and foreign influence there. I'm not sure what the laws in the UK are like on that.
Now, it's got to be proved, though, isn't it?
We don't quite have in the same way America has a constitution on that sort of thing. And
No, but we're still under European law.
yeah, so we would still have to follow that. But then what actually happens after that point? Because if nobody actually wants no deal, apart from the government and a minority of the country...
Well, whatever happens, it's got to be... Something's got to be a bit clearer by the 19th, hasn't it? According to the Ben Act.
But at the moment...
See, did they not say... The Ben Act, does that not say that if there hasn't been a deal accepted by Europe by then, is that the summit, or is that the 17th?
If there hasn't been a deal accepted by a parliament, because the deal
No,
that
no,
they originally drafted
by
was
Europe.
accepted by Europe.
That he would have to ask for an extension.
Theresa May's deal was accepted
Yeah.
by Europe.
Yeah.
Wasn't accepted by our parliament, though, because
Don't know then.
it doesn't make Remainers happy because it loses us freedom of movement and freedom to work in other countries, as well as access to the customs market. And it didn't make Leavers happy because there wouldn't be a border in Ireland. Yeah, so I really just don't know what's going to happen, but regardless, none of us have any power and that feels kind of shit. But also I don't get this thing of, they kept repeating this phrase at the Tory conference, which, by the way, the building in which it was held was ironically partly funded by the EU. It just feels like you can't write this stuff. They kept saying, get Brexit done.
Yeah, well, that's the latest catchphrase.
Well, yeah, it's just sort of so vague.
I mean, let's
To
face
the
it, the
point of
word
meaningless.
Brexit was originally a catchphrase, really.
Yeah. But first of all, it just means nothing. Brexit means loads of different things to different people. That's why we're in this mess. And second of all, it won't really be done even with a no deal. We'll still have... I think the figure I saw was 7 to 10 years of talks on new trade deals, both with the EU and with other countries, to negotiate.
Well, I mean, Europe's tending to start to look at it more of a possibility, or they're starting to look at the possibility of having to work out how to cope with the United Kingdom being in this divided territory for possibly 10 to 15 years, like not actually leaving Europe, but having a nation that's that broken as a part of Europe, because it's happened before, having countries that have, ended up splitting and stuff, that could quite easily happen here.
Yeah.
So that's more of a long-term possibility that they're considering now, is how do we deal with the UK going through all of this for a long time.
But then there's also worries about Italy going through a similar thing, because there's a worrying far-right rising there.
But that's the thing. I mean, we hear
Same
about
with
this sort
France.
of stuff going on in other countries in the EU. We think that for some reason we're the centre of the universe and that it's a massive big deal to Europe. Okay, it's important to them, but we're only one of 28 to them.
Well, it's just, it could start unravelling because Poland's government's gone far right as well, to the point where they're being very openly anti-Semitic, which is worrying given Poland's history. And that was originally one of the success stories. It was something that was lifted out of the Cold War, and now it seems to be going to shit again. Hungary, you got a similar story with authoritarians rising, and all of it feels like it could very quickly unravel. And something that I felt when I went to the European Parliament on my trip to Strasbourg was that it's the most democratic place
But what happens
on
then?
earth, really. So I don't want that to fall apart.
No, but there's an awful lot to fall apart. I mean, there's an awful lot. When you say unravel, there's a lot to unravel because of the way that Europe has developed over the last 50 years. Like, I mean, for a start, the vast majority of them have the same money. how does that practically get broken up?
Well,
that's a massive...
Yeah, there is that. That's something that's keenly different
and
than
just the fact
UK there.
Just the fact that us trying to leave has been such a massive task that we're not even sure is possible at the moment.
Well, that's the thing, though. They might not leave, but they might seriously undermine it from the inside.
Well, that's
we've
what
been doing for
yeah.
decades.
Yeah.
But it's just all kind of depressing on that front. On slightly more uplifting news, I mean, it's very easy to be pessimistic with Donald Trump because he does so much shit that you think, oh, it's got to get him this time, and it never
I
does.
think it was 1.8 billion or something that his golf course in Aberdeenshire has lost in the last year. It was either 1.8 million or 1.8 billion. I'm not sure.
Quite a big difference.
I know it's quite a big difference, but it's still got an illion in it.
Okay.
It's still infinitely more money than we've got.
Maybe we should make you trade minister. You'd probably be better than who's it? Liz Truss at the moment.
What was happening? What something? Yeah, there was a nice interview with her. She looked like something out of the thick of it.
Oh, they all do at the moment. That fucking coffee cup fiasco where they passed him a coffee cup and the other aides took it away and just gave him the worst death stare I've ever seen. I mean, I just want to see a drama between these two aides. It would be fucking hilarious.
But he's definitely playing a game because did you see? I don't know if you saw any of the coverage of the day after the Tory party conference finished when Boris Johnson was back in Parliament and he was Mr. Ultra Nice. He was playing. I mean, it was clearly. I mean, he did use the words "surrender act," but very, very quietly. And the rest of it, he was very keen to be showing an understanding and collaborative and friendly face to Parliament in general
Party
and
conference.
support. Yeah,
Interesting.
but to me, it was almost. It was like it was such a change from the week before that it was almost a bit too obvious for me.
Yeah.
You know when you kind of like somebody who's always been really nasty to you is suddenly really nice one day. You're like, what are you up to?
Yeah, it feels like they're about to stab you in the back.
Yeah, it's obviously it's a cunning plan.
Mm. But America, Trump,
Do
they're the possibility that, well, they're looking to go forward with impeachment proceedings.
Yeah, but
And they've been reluctant to do that so far, even with the Mueller report, which was pretty damning, except...
what does that actually mean? The only thing that's going to actually get him out, I think, is if he starts to lose popularity with the public.
Well, he technically lost popularity.
It's his own party that will then want rid of him.
He technically lost the popular vote in 2016. He's not the most popular person, except the system's been changed in a way that benefits those small states that are mostly Republican. So
none of this is anything like as democratic in the UK or the US is anything like as democratic as the EU.
No, but the UK is significantly more democratic than the US.
America, yeah.
And that is worrying because our democracy's fucked.
Yes, indeed.
And that's because of the voting system, the tactical vote thing. It neglects safe seats.
What do you think's more likely, a general election or a referendum before the end of the year? Or before the end of, say, January, because that's the most likely time for an extension, isn't it? 3 months.
General election, probably, because I don't see the Tories shifting.
No.
I don't see the whip shifting on that.
There is we could actually have both, because if there is a general election...
But last time, Jeremy Corbyn ran a very good campaign, but it seems like it's been quite long and he's been going down and down in favourability to the point where I think now he's 70-something% unfavourable.
I've got no idea.
I don't understand how, despite I have my doubts about Corbyn, I don't see how someone can see what Boris Johnson does and still go, actually no, Corbyn's worse, because it's this sort of double standard, and the Tories are great at gaming the system of optics, basically.
Well, it's a difficult one when you've got so many people that are apparently in favour of that kind of politics and that kind of society.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get we were listening to that Brexit cast, weren't we? And there's a 15-year-old Donald Cummings super fan. And you're like, you can't
understand how someone like that can exist.
No, but I mean, there's a lot of. I suppose the easiest way to kind of bridge that gap between how can people be anything like that and your own views is to accept that there are a lot of people who are very different from us.
That doesn't make it necessarily okay, though.
I didn't say it did, but yeah, it's just a way to understand how things have got the way they are and could potentially get worse.
There's a lot of people that have different priorities, because I just sort of assume, stop biting your nails, that...
That's a really strange thing to assume.
I just sort of assume that most people would have the same sorts of values, I guess, or at least maybe not priorities, but the same sort of base things of this is what's important to humanity. They might put that in a different order, but they'd still have those same things, unless they are mentally disturbed. But
there are a lot of people who just care about their own security.
yeah,
and
but it's sort of our people. He's pissed off because he's changing the camera. Our
wouldn't have known that.
They might have.
They might have.
Whatever.
They might have.
No
not,
one
not,
actually cares.
in that case, I'm a no one.
You've disrupted my train of thought now.
We'll use proper grammar then.
Dick. Yeah, they might, whether they've been born with that sort of disposition to be selfish and self-centered like that and very centered on their own interests, or whether that's more of how they react to what they've been told by advertising, politicians, just societal norms as well, I guess. Whether that's something that could be fixed, I guess, or it's just always going to be a problem.
The other thing I think to remember as well is that there are very, very different environments to inhabit. I mean, you know, obviously having lived in London for a couple of years, that's a world away from, you know, survival in a big city like that is a very different. We have a fairly stress-free life by comparison. I don't know about stress-free. It's just a different outlook. You know, it's different.
Yeah, the less people, it feels like you're being
different world.
I guess.
But at the same time, it's like being lonely in a crowd. You know, you can easily be on a tube train with 200 people and hear a pin drop because nobody is even making eye contact with other people. You know, whereas here it's unusual for me to walk down the street without and pass somebody without us saying hello to each other, even if I don't know them.
But quite a lot of the people around this area you probably do know as well.
Yeah, possibly. They probably say hello to me thinking that I know who they are.
Maybe.
Or maybe we're surrounded by podcast listeners who know who we are.
I doubt it.
You never know.
Well, I see our listens on Anchor every week, so...
Do you?
Anyway, yeah. There's also the flip side to that, though, that there's a lot less opportunities around here. There are opportunities there, it's just sort of you have to travel far for that and not everyone can. Anyway, I was going to go and talk about the impeachment proceedings, but we seem to keep bringing it back to the UK.
Yeah, well, see, it's not that I object to talking about any of this, it's just that sometimes I feel like there's no hope with some of it. It's just, you've just got to watch it play out.
Yeah, we don't have any power, especially in America. We don't have any power over what actually happened, but we still have a vested interest in what does happen.
Yeah, only time will tell.
Especially depending on how events coincide at different times.
Yeah.
We may be negotiating a trade deal with America with a different president than we would be right now.
See, I would trust Europe to negotiate a trade deal more than I would trust Westminster.
Yeah, certainly more than Liz Truss or Boris Johnson.
Especially considering that the photograph I saw of, they're not even hiding it now, the Tory party conference, there was a Cayman Islands stand in the exhibition.
Fuck's sake. I think that's the thing. A lot of these politicians have no shame. So they constantly lie. They constantly do what we would see as morally disgusting things.
We see it
because it makes them a fuck ton of money.
The idea of them putting their money somewhere like the Cayman Islands isn't a negative concept to them when they kind of want to turn the UK into a similar place for people to invest, you know.
But it's sort of like, can you stop biting your nails?
Oh, I have to edit this shit out. Can you stop?
Well, it started bleeding when you biting them earlier in the week, so just stop biting them and then you don't have to edit it out. Wanker. Words. Oh, disruption. You always do this.
Don't blame me.
But don't bite your nails.
I'm just trying to find a some kind of way to start the subject of the podcast.
Well, I have been trying to get over to the impeachment thing. Right, so basically what happened was...
I thought you decided not to.
No, I was going to, but you keep fucking interrupting me. This always happens. Right, he was on a phone call with the Ukrainian president, who ironically is a comedian, but that's another thing. And I think their president or prime minister was talking about how they'd need to buy more missiles to deal with Russia, because there's still a lot of instability there from 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea.
Yeah.
And then immediately after that, he asked about looking into a business that the son of his main political opponent, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, had, at least in his opinion, earned a lot of money out of nowhere. And there are rules in the US against investigating, using foreign powers to influence American politics by investigating or by using money, that sort of thing. Also asked, whilst being filmed, China to look into a similar thing, but he can do literally anything and Republicans will still close their ears. So basically there's a whistleblower within the CIA, I think, that presented a whistleblower complaint to Congress. Was that before or after the rough transcript?
I don't know.
I think the rough transcript came out and then he launched a more precise, detailed version of it.
Yeah, I think the rough transcript came first.
However, a lot of the Republicans seemed to respond interestingly.
Well, this is what I was talking about when I said about the only way for him to be ousted, really, is to get his own party to turn against him, because it's public opinion that's going to lose them the election, and they care about that. So he's not going to resign of his own accord. Well,
it's interesting. One of the anchors, I guess, on Fox News, I think recently, I think they either said it in an interview or tweeted it, that the way that he did this was unacceptable for a president, but yet they still continue to go on to their show and defend him, calling Democrats crazy and saying that they're stupid for thinking it's an issue of national security. But it all depends on enough people thinking that they're better off impeaching a president, which is a lot that they have to have seriously lost trust there to say that they're gonna impeach their own guy. And I think it needs to be a vote in the Senate of 2/3. However, I think there might have been one person, I think it might have been Andrew Jackson, that was actually impeached. Other than that, the ones that you'd think were actually impeached resigned before they got impeached. Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton.
No, Bill Clinton was impeached, but impeachment doesn't mean that you lose your job. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that what you've done has been frowned upon by. Bill Clinton resigned after he'd been impeached, not as a result of the impeachment, but it wasn't long after that, because the impeachment was bad for his image.
Yeah, but the impeachment didn't actually cause him to be removed.
No, it doesn't. Impeachment doesn't mean that.
How did they remove a president then?
I'm not sure. Impeachment is just a kind of... It's a recognition that they've done something they shouldn't have as a president, basically. But it doesn't force them to react to it.
Feels like it should be way more formal.
I think resignation's probably more... I mean, I'm not sure whether or not the Republicans would have to resort to other means, but I think resignation is probably more pressure from within your own party, which, as I say, is likely to come because the public's opinion of Trump is waning.
I feel like he's come from outside the Republican Party, sort of. You know, he wasn't exactly someone who had been a politician for a long time. He'd been talking about politics for a long time, and he might have been a member and donated quite large amounts, but...
See, this is why I'm not really that sure why there's any point to the UK talk of impeaching Boris Johnson, because it's like, well, it's not actually any worse than being found to have broken the law, which he's already.
I don't think we have the
happened,
same impeachment thing, do we?
Well, there has been talk of attempting to impeach him, but it's like, it doesn't actually. I mean, surely being found guilty of breaking the law by disbanding Parliament is just as bad as impeachment anyway.
He acted unlawfully, but he didn't do anything illegal. It's kind of... Because he didn't necessarily act unlawfully. The prorogation of Parliament was unlawful, so basically it didn't happen, but it kind of did. Because laws are weird, but it's all a mess. Anyway, we've been talking about this for...
Too much time.
What's your thing meant to be on?
Time.
Can we get on to the bit I like now?
What?
Get on to the bit I like now. It's not that I do like having a news bit at the beginning, but I just think it should perhaps be shorter. If, well, certainly as at the moment, it's just like it's all for about 3 years. It's been the same.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm going back and listening to the early Brexit cast stuff now, and it's like we're just going through the same shit that Theresa May went through.
It does definitely felt like something changed in 2016, and
yeah, everybody thought, "What the fuck just happened in June 2016?"
Yeah, and then following.
I remember that morning,
Trump's election. Then following that, things
linking that to the subject of the podcast. That is one of those moments where you do remember where you were.
Yeah.
And who you were with, what you were doing. Much like 9/11.
Yeah, it just sort of feels surreal at first.
The slow realisation overnight that... I mean, it's difficult to see it from a Leave voter's point of view, because obviously I'm not one.
No.
But, that night to a lot of us was a shock.
Yeah, but it sort of felt like the point in a movie where the hero is at their lowest, I guess.
It was a disappointment because it was at that point that I realised that the UK wasn't what I thought it was. I suddenly realised that I'm not a typical... Well, I mean...
But that's the thing, though. The discussion's changed, and it's like boiling a frog in a pot of water, whatever the analogy is. The discussion slowly changed from just being outside the EU to being very distinctly removed from anything to do with Europe, other than it being geographically close to us.
Yeah. There is a conflation of the difference between Europe and the European Union.
Yeah, but quite a lot of Europe is connected in a similar way we thought we would be to the European Union, like Norway, like Iceland, like Switzerland, Turkey.
So looking back,
Moldova,
I mean, how long has the European Union been in existence?
Mum, you'll know, was it 1993?
But there was a referendum in the 70s to join, was it the single market? So if you look back to then from now, that's what, 30, 40...
43 years
43
ago.
Years.
And the median age in the
years
UK,
before that.
The median age in the UK is around 40, so literally half the country wasn't even alive when that vote took place.
Yeah.
So it is, in my eyes, consigned to history. Even less of the population could vote on that.
Yeah.
So it's sort of that, at least, involvement with trade in Europe has been around for all my life, and most of your life, at least most of the life that you were conscious for.
Yeah. Time. I mean, when I think back to... memory is a weird thing because you remember the way things were through the lens of the present.
Yeah.
And I can remember... I suppose the first thing I would look back to would be a time before smartphones, because I'm talking about noticeably big changes in everyday behaviour of people.
I vaguely remember that big change because I remember you getting a smartphone, and that being amazing and revolutionary, and we still had those
Yeah, I
crappy
remember
Mojo one.
switching the screen on for the first time and being like, but
It's like, oh, you can move it with your touch. You can touch it and it moves.
yeah,
That's mind blowing.
at that time.
Yeah, and a
Then
similar
if you go a bit
token.
further back than that, obviously, then I'm thinking the advent of broadband connectivity. Back when we were on a 56k modem, it was a very different world. I mean, looking further back than that, obviously, everything's changed. I mean, like, when I think back to the late 80s, early 90s, which I would think of as the time when I changed from, in age terms anyway, from a child to an adult. It was still phone boxes, and
Yeah.
I didn't get my first mobile phone of any kind until I think mid-90s. Facebook, was that 2005?
Think so, thereabouts.
I mean, the World Wide Web, that just seems weird, thinking the World Wide Web, 1995. The World Wide Web didn't exist until then. I mean, I knew of the internet before that, but it was very much... I mean, I know there would have been a lot of people on it, but it would have been a very different, exclusive crowd that were on that.
You could still have LAN parties, though, couldn't you?
It was... Yeah, I mean, you could go online through dial-up modems. But, there were news servers and
You couldn't connect
sorts
to the
of
whole
chat
world.
rooms.
Everyone has
Email existed.
Yeah.
But it was all very different. I remember something called Telex,
Never heard of this.
which I think was something like an electronic kind of fax-based system. But anyway, it was all very inaccessible to the vast majority of people, basically.
Right.
And certainly back in the 70s when I was young, it's just I mean, things have just changed completely. But the thing I'm trying to get to, I suppose, is that it seems from where we are that change is accelerating. But is it really? I mean, when you look back the same amount of time before that.
Yeah, I can't remember. All these. I mean, they're not really laws. It's not like there's anything really influencing this to actually happen. It's just a general prediction based on history. Is that I can't remember what the specifics of it was, but I think it was sort of as time goes on, in half the time, we'll make twice the amount of progress as the last 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, there's Moore's law, which was about the processing power, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's a similar kind of thing that, things grow exponentially. But I suppose that makes sense because you are kind of standing on the shoulders of giants, aren't you? You're using the technology to...
Yeah. I mean, you can see that in many different things. Science, we'll say music. And they all feed into each other as well. To the point where now we've got the World Wide Web, which means that if someone else is on there, and the likelihood is that they are, I could connect with the world's best scientists or the world's best composers if they would be willing to talk to me.
It's strange to try and imagine and try and predict and think about how much things have changed in the last 30, 40 years.
I mean, imagine
how they're going to change in the next 30
You'd have to write
years.
a letter to your MP or to the Prime Minister if you wanted to get them to read what you had to say, and likelihood is that they wouldn't read it, and please stop biting your nails.
For fuck's sake.
But now you can reply on what they say on Twitter, you can send them emails.
They still don't read it.
No, their PR team probably does. But that's the point,
Yeah.
There's just so much information there now.
They'll have a personal assistant. An AI personal assistant.
Probably at some point, yeah.
So time itself is more of an abstract concept. What is it?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I'm a very physicsy person, so that's where it gets a bit interesting, because time isn't really as fixed as people would necessarily think. I mean, we've been doing this in higher physics recently, time dilation, which, it's a bit of a mindfuck getting your head around the concept in the first place, but you can sort of get it conceptually. But then actually putting that into an equation is quite weird. And that's
can I maybe just maybe bring up what I think to be an example of that may make sense to people who have no idea about the physics of it. But the idea that if you leave the planet Earth and travel near the speed of light, you could be gone for a year, but when you come back, 100 years would have passed on the Earth.
Mm.
You
have to be going very, very near the speed of light for that much of a time shift to happen.
But you can observe that when you... they've done experiments on that where they put get a watch, get 2 watches and put one in a plane that goes around the planet.
People that have been up on the International Space Station are very, very slightly younger than they would be if they'd stayed on Earth.
But all of these concepts are extremely important when you're talking about something like, say, satellite navigation systems, because they have to...
Yeah.
They have
See
to...
that bloke from Maze Runner and Game of Thrones, he must be living in space all the time because he still looks exactly the same age.
And Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
And Paul Rudd.
Yeah, they are...
They might just be robots.
Night Star stuff. But something I'm in some ways I'm glad that I don't have a physics-based mind in terms of that I don't know that much about physics in an actual kind of passed exams and studied it kind of sense. But at the same time, I have a very interested mind in that sense. And I wonder whether sometimes it takes not knowing all the accepted concepts to come up with something, an idea that might go against everything. That's kind of what I'm thinking of. Is the last few days I've been thinking about time, and I've been thinking, all this dark matter that is supposedly around, like that. How much is it? 97% of the universe or something?
Basically, what it is that there's 96% of the universe that's unaccounted for with what we regularly perceive as matter. The rest of it we don't pick up on our instruments, things like neutrinos. We can observe the effects of it, but we can't actually observe it directly.
I have absolutely no idea whether this makes any sense in a scientific, physical sense, but what if that stuff was, in essence, something to do with time?
What?
Well, it's difficult trying to get your head around what they mean when they say that 96% of what makes up the universe is unaccounted for.
It's basically...
They're not talking about physical matter, presumably, because you can't... If it's unaccounted for, then it's not present to detect. Do you know what I mean? That we don't have the means of detecting whatever it is.
That's the thing. We can see that the universe is expanding, and it seems to be accelerating. However, if all that was in the universe was matter as we see it, things would have probably at least decelerated and maybe start collapsing by now.
So basically the calculations, the theory of everything, if you like, isn't complete.
Yeah. Basically, it's things that we're not entirely sure what it is, but we know that it's not like what we usually see.
Yeah.
And it's sort of everywhere. And it doesn't affect us for the most part, but very occasionally, and this is the thing with neutrinos, there'll be a little reaction there. It's all very quantum as well, which is always fun.
Where was it? I saw there was something about they'd done a thing. The slit experiment with.
Yes.
There was an article I saw where they'd done. I think it must have been the BBC News. There was an item on that they'd done an experiment where they'd shown like either 200 or 2,000 atoms had appeared in 2 places at the same time in this experiment they'd done. It was like a much bigger version of the slit experiment, and they've managed to get a group of atoms that big to appear in 2 places at the same time, which was weird. But I like mentally exploring the relationship or the potential different kind of theory-based ideas about the relationship between gravity and mass and time and.
But time really is only a measure of how fast you're going compared to the speed of light.
Is it, though?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll think about that. Because, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of the universe as a whole being a concept of... Obviously, if you're thinking in a physical sense, you're thinking about all the physical matter which occupies the space we think of as the universe. Yeah? But most people, and I think this is something, it's a byproduct of our mind's way of dealing with our journey through life, I suppose. Think of that in terms of at any given time, rather than I might for instance, suggest that the entirety of the universe can only be measured if you take into account everything that, not just everything that exists now, but everything that has ever existed and ever will exist. It's just that we're at a single point in that continuum.
There is a theory that, and this is very difficult because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and that is basically that once you get down to a certain size, because the size of the particle is actually smaller than wavelengths of light, you can measure its position, but you can't detect its velocity, or you can measure its velocity, but you can't detect its position.
Is that not something to do with vibrations? Because, I mean...
Yeah, kind of.
When you say the wavelength of light, wavelength and frequency aren't the same thing, are they?
No, but seeing as the speed of light is constant...
Is it?
Yes.
Do you know what I
It's a universal constant. It kind of has to be.
Yeah. Do you know, it always messes with my head is the idea of, like bouncing a ball on a train or on an aeroplane or something like that. It's like, what happened? Right, no, this is the one I was thinking about. What happens if you're travelling really fast, say on a rocket, and you're shining a torch out of the front window of that rocket, and it's the idea of the light that's coming out of that torch ahead of the rocket is sure. Well, to me, it's a really difficult thing to get your head around. The fact that is it travelling at the speed of light plus the speed of the rocket?
No, because it's only in its frame of reference.
Yeah, so that's when you're talking about blue and red shifting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it's about how quickly something's moving in relation to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, the universe is moving.
So that has
and
to be
all the
related
light
to
in
time.
the universe would be moving within it. However, in the frame of reference, as the absolute frame of reference, I guess, space.
It's where my head gets lost, but that's essentially pretty much what you were talking about when you said about your speed relative to the speed of light. Because...
However, redshift and blue shift isn't actually so much to do with time dilation. It's to do with something else that happens when you're going near the speed of light, and that is length contraction.
Yeah.
So if you're going near the speed of light, things will actually go a bit squished.
Yeah, we really need.
And that happens to the wavelengths of light as they enter.
There's a whole episode. There's a whole episode of the original Carl Sagan's Cosmos series on that sort of thing, and I follow it. It's a bit like the Big Bang to Black Holes book. I follow it up to a certain point, and each time I read or watch things like that, I follow it a little bit further than the last time. But it's mind-blowing stuff, and I really don't know how physicists keep their sanity.
Oh, I know. I mean, do you mean A Brief History of Time?
Yeah.
Usually how Stephen Hawking starts each chapter is with the history of what he's going to talk about. And most people can probably follow that because it's fairly simple stuff that's just ingrained into you.
Yeah.
Up to a certain point, and then it gets more and more complicated to the point where he's talking about stuff that he doesn't know about and he's speculating.
But here's the thing, right? For me, I'm thinking, you say up to a certain point within a chapter, he's talking about the history of the subject, that it's fairly easy to follow because it's presumably well accepted stuff. Is that
it'll be a
more
different point
advanced
for everyone, really.
Yeah, but if you think like maybe a couple of 100 years ago, would a lot of that have gone straight over people's heads?
Oh, definitely. I mean, a couple of 100 years ago,
so like
relativity wasn't around. So
no, but so in essence,
Clark Maxwell
are
hadn't
we
figured out electro
in the time where in the space in the place we are in the time continuum now, the average human being is able to understand and accept concepts about time which advanced physicists probably had trouble with a couple of 100 years ago.
That's the thing, standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, if Isaac Newton was brought into the world of the day, he wouldn't know how to use a tablet. However, that doesn't make you smarter than him. Because again, it's all relative to the time that you live in.
But then essentially, when you're talking about smarts there, you're talking about really the physical makeup of their biology, the potential that they're...
I guess.
intellectual power.
I mean,
has.
we can apply a similar, I guess, sort of logic to do with time.
Have you heard of genetic memory?
What?
Have you heard of genetic memory?
Yeah, but let me make my point first, because you might be interested in it.
Okay.
We can apply a sort of similar logic to morality, I think, where looking back at time, whilst we'd considered a lot of things that were generally accepted to be fucked up, there were a lot of people that broke the mould. Stop undermining me with your bottom.
So it's just I just farted and you said there were a lot of people that broke the mould, isn't it?
Yeah. So say something like it was a generally accepted idea among scientists for quite a long time that there were genetic differences that made white people better than black people. I'm gonna
go off on a tangent here because I was just thinking. I think we get on a lot better when we're podcasting when there's nobody else here. I feel like we argue when there's other people present.
No, I just get excited about physics. So maybe that's
okay.
it.
Genetic. No, I don't know about if I really mean genetic memory, and I don't know whether or not some of this is down to just because obviously, I mean, I've got 48 years behind me, you've got 16 behind you, and you've learned. We've both been exposed to stories of the history of our species since we were born, so it all feels very familiar. But there's just an innate kind of feeling that it's not that I'm not talking about having lived previous lives.
No.
But I'm talking about whether or not there is any essence in DNA that can pass down any of the sort of historical experiences our species has gone through. And I think and a good example of that would be the mirroring that children, newborn babies, there are certain programmed kind of behaviour patterns that are naturally in newborn animals, I suppose, that can't possibly be from memory, and they haven't had time to be taught them yet. They're programmed.
Well, yeah, that's essentially what genes are.
Yeah,
program coding. But basically, what it is, I mean, I presume there's some way that they can tell that these people are closely related. I mean, there's a certain amount of just being able to see that by, this looks the same as that they must be sort of similar to me. They're the same species as me, maybe. Yeah. I mean, they won't be thinking this consciously, but that'll all be going on in the background processes. So you've already got that idea of this person is closely related to me. They must be a caregiver. I'll stick close to them. Because the people that didn't develop that gene went off and got lost as a child and got killed by a tiger or something. Do
you know what I think is really weird when you think about the perspective nature of time in an experiential sense? Because I look back to, and this is a lens memory, like I was talking about before. I have to remember that I don't know what it means. But if I look back to how I remember feeling at the age of 16 and later than that, and how I feel now, it's almost like at the age of 16, I felt like I'd been alive a hell of a lot longer than I feel like I've been alive now. It's a strange kind of thing. I suppose because I suppose that the reason for it being that 16 years back then to me was everything that I'd ever experienced.
Yeah.
Now, 16 years is only a third of what I've ever experienced.
So to me, that would be, I can't do maths right now. 5 and a bit years. It's a long time.
Yeah, but
when you think that's the length of like a university course.
But when you think that that's been my whole life,
Yeah.
My whole life is 48 years now. Your whole life is 16. How long do you feel? It's difficult because you can't remember before you were born, obviously, but you can't even remember within however many years of being born. I don't know. I mean, I can't really remember anything back past about 6 or 7. Yeah. I know there are people that remember earlier than that,
I guess, but like I have abstract images and feelings, I guess, from when I was younger than that.
So, I mean, I wonder whether or not it's almost like... I don't think it's that things necessarily fade and disintegrate. It's maybe that the structure of memory hasn't been formed early enough to retain things. It's almost like you've maybe got like a random access memory at that point, but you haven't built your hard
sort of
drive
what
yet.
it is, and I'm not an expert on psychology, is at that point the brain is meant to be a sponge
Right.
for basically all the information you're going to need for years to come.
Yeah.
There's a lot
You've
coming
got to have
at
a way
you.
to store it.
Yeah, so the memories sort of get pushed out. The more important stuff is kept, like, how do I not shit myself? And how do my muscles work? And don't touch that hot thing.
Yeah. We really should get on with watching some more Star Trek, because what came into my... We're thinking about time. And this is actually... Anyone who knows Star Trek Next Generation well will know the irony behind this. You probably already do, because you've read the plot of just about every episode, even though you haven't seen most of them.
Threshold is an infamous episode.
Yeah. No, that was Voyager, though.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about the first ever episode that I saw of Star Trek Next Generation was All Good Things.
All right. That's the last one, isn't it?
Yeah. But if you know that episode, that's poetic. It's perfect for a Star Trek fan, because there's a concept in that episode which is it's mind blowing. Because I mean, as I've said to you before, the temporal paradox episodes are my favourites in.
I've
Star Trek
seen.
universe.
This is slight spoilers. I've seen like compilations where it's got funny Q bits, and
Yeah, well,
he is in that episode.
yeah, he's in a lot of episodes, but he's in the first episode as well.
Yes.
And there is a parallel to be drawn by that. There are different temporal anomalies kind of coinciding with each other in that last episode, which basically, without giving too much away, there is a chance, if things aren't done right in that episode by Picard and his crew, there are different time periods going on, and they all have to do the same thing in the same place at the same time to basically save the existence of the human race, because there's something that they've done or not done in the past. There's like a reverse temporal anomaly thing where it's a rift in space-time that gets bigger the further back in time it goes.
Yeah.
So that, and it's caused by the Enterprise in the
Enterprise
present or future.
C?
I can't remember.
There's a lot in
But
I
basically,
play Star Trek Online.
there's a good chance
there's a lot
that
of plots there
causes
that
that
get
causes
tied
the human race to have never existed in the first
Right.
place, because it intersects. The anomaly gets so big in the past that it intersects with where the planet Earth is when the first amino acids are forming,
Right.
and that prevents life from emerging on the Earth.
And that would cause all sorts of temporal anomalies.
Yeah, all good things. That's one of my favourite episodes. But the fact that was the first one I ever saw, I think, is poetically spot on for me.
It must have been a bit confusing.
Not really. I mean, it stands on its own as a story.
Yeah, I think they all do.
But obviously, it means a lot more if you know the crew. But in terms of telling the time nowadays, how many people actually wear watches anymore? I haven't worn a watch in years.
No, I feel like there's probably, like, amongst a group of, I think probably around a quarter of people, maybe.
That much. Although that means something different nowadays, because a watch now is, I mean, they're smart watches, aren't they?
Well, yeah, I'm sort of estimating that from my friends that have watches, but then there'll be different groups where they'll be higher. I mean, I imagine among business
I used to
people
have a
that would be
watch.
quite high because they have to stick to deadlines. And
I used to
be
have a
at
watch I was
meetings
so
at certain
proud of when I was, I think, in my later school years. It had a liquid crystal display, but it wasn't. It was digital in terms of that it had a liquid crystal display, but the liquid crystal display was of the hands of a clock on like a circular display. It wasn't numbers, it was clock hands. I thought it was ace. It was white. Like a kind of swatch thing, sports watch kind of. I'm really excited about that.
I feel like having a digital representation of just a clock face kind of defeats the point of having it digitally represented.
Yeah, I suppose it's kind of ironic. You kind of a digital representation of an analog.
I mean, it would be
medium.
sort of trying to make a clock look like a sundial, I guess.
Yeah. Or a CD sound like music.
I guess.
Oh, God. We're trying to do a podcast on my birthday.
Are you okay?
No, I don't know. I think so.
I'm enjoying it. I feel like we've had
Are you?
interesting conversation.
You
always
I
doubt
get
yourself
lost.
so
I get
much,
lost.
and
I
then-
know. I'm such a doubter.
In the editing process, it's actually really good.
What's the most complex time signature you've performed?
Complex is different to annoying and difficult because
We should try and do the Rite of Spring clapping exercise.
oh no, I can't do fucking no, because I'll show myself up for being an idiot, especially if I'm a bit drunk.
I've played Rite of Spring, not in a concert, but I've played it in a rehearsal at the academy when I was at college. It's very, in fact, keep the conversation going. I'd just like to show you a page of the score, maybe, or the percussion part. We'll see if I can find the percussion part of the Rite of Spring. It'll be on ISMLP probably.
Yeah, music-wise, I mean, there's annoying time signatures for like the whole piece, but sometimes you just get a bar in there that's different. So, for example, in AYO, we had a world premiere of a piece, and every now and then it had a 7/8 bar inserted.
I was surprised to find, because I've just transcribed or just programmed the keyboard part for Living on a Prayer, that there are actually, although the whole thing is pretty much in 4/4, there are a couple of bits where there's just a single 3/4 bar. Yeah, when you think about it, you've got the chorus and it finishes, give it a shot, oh, and that is a triplet followed by a crotchet.
Oh yeah, I remember this. There's this
So there's a beat lost.
I watched a video on where
Talking time signatures. As Maestro's just walked back in the room.
I watched a video on popular songs where they switch the time signature to 3/4 to increase the impact, and that was one of them.
I'm trying to find him the percussion part for Rite of Spring at the moment.
There's also Heart of Glass by Blondie.
Oh yeah.
That switches into 3/4.
Well, progressive rock is very much, and metal is takes advantage of all that very much.
Oh yeah, I remember there was he showed me was it a documentary or just like a little side video that they did behind the scenes
Of what?
where the previous drummer, Mike Portnoy, basically showed how he works in, I think it was something ridiculous like 17/8
This one,
bars.
timpani or triangle, tambourine, tam-tam, bass drum and cymbals?
Timpani.
Timpani. You like your timpani, don't you? He wants
Oh,
to
they're always fun.
be... You like going boom, 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 boom.
Like, they're always good fun.
Boom, 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 boom.
I mean, there are annoying time signatures to have for the whole piece. One of the ones I'm doing at senior concert band has 3/2, which is annoying to count.
This is just as easy as 3/4 though.
It is, but it's much slower than you expect it to be, and then you have to count in ands, and
Alright, okay.
then it just annoys my normal way of thinking.
Okay, this is the easy bit. The Adoration of the Earth. It just moves between 3/4, 4/4 and 2/4. So you basically...
Symphony's not actually playing there, so
No.
it's very easy. Well, apart from counting. Yeah, it does. It looks like it moves time signature a lot. 7/4. Fucking hell. 3/4, 7/4.
6 8 5 8 9 8 5 8 7 8 5 8.
That's just really fucking annoying. Because with 7/8, it feels like
Here we go.
it basically feels like you got a bar, but there's just a bit missing. Because that bit basically is what it is.
These are all 16s. See, that I find quite difficult moving between, like, if it was all 16s, you'd got like 2/16, 3/16. That would be fair enough. But then they throw in a 2/8. And you're like,
It's like,
why would you do that?
it looks like a fucking nightmare.
I'm sure that I thought that said 3/18 there. I think the difficulty with it is it's I say the difficulty that there are some complex time signatures, but everything that's happening in the different parts is related to the bar lines in different ways. Where something is in, say, 4 beats in a bar and you're working in 3s across that, it
Right.
becomes really, it's like only every 3 bars do you get back into the time with the bar line.
Yeah.
It's like playing like 6/8 against 3/4. Do you know what I mean?
So with Heart of Glass, it goes da 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 da, but the rest of it's in 4/4.
There's a famous example of one piece that I first time I got to play it, I was really confused by it. And Tchaikovsky does this a lot. Is it doesn't sound like it's written. Do you know Enigma Variations by Elgar?
No.
There's a piece called Nimrod, which is.
By the way, I apologise to people that aren't musical, and also it's the camera.
Why is
really
that pointing
squinting.
at me?
You haven't been seeing my beautiful face.
Yeah, it's a very famous piece, and it doesn't sound like it's actually in 3 beats in a bar, but it sounds completely. It goes. Sorry about that.
I mean, yeah, that was a bit weird. Yeah, most of that will go over non-musical people's head, but then again, I was talking about like quantum physics earlier, so you get a bit of everything.
That's just to bring the tone down. I mean, what's that about?
What?
5/4. Bum 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 bum. Sorry. We're back on Rite of Spring. I think we're probably gonna. What that? Bum bum bum.
Yeah, but they're really short as well because they got rests in between them.
How do you conduct something like that as well, though?
You just go. I mean, most of the
Pierre Boulez used to do it with the flat of his hand. He didn't have a.
Most of the conductors that you see, like conducting professional orchestras, the players are good enough that they're not really conducting in the way that you'll see. I mean, when I say professional orchestras, I mean like really top orchestras. They just sort of set the tempo and set the emotion.
Yeah, and then guide.
And then rise certain parts up where they want it. But they understand that most of the people can keep count in their head.
They're basically there to pull an interpretation out of the performers.
Yeah, so we've been watching the Berlin Philharmonic recently. Their head conductor, the new head conductor, Kirill Petrenko, most of what he's doing, even like as musicians, I don't really understand what he's doing in terms of the time signature.
There's times he's looking as though he's stood absolutely still just for a couple of bars. Because he's trying to.
It's just there's so much emotion in
yeah.
that, and especially with strings.
This is related to time because we're talking about. I mean, this essentially the conductor of an orchestra essentially came from a concept of timekeeping originally. And do you know the Lully story?
No.
The inventor of conducting, it actually killed him.
What?
Originally, the first kind of the guy who invented the concept of conducting an orchestra to keep them in time. It wasn't waving arms around. It became that because of the inventor was a guy called Lully. That was his surname. I don't remember his first name. But he used to have a wooden, I think it was wooden, basically a staff with a spike on the end that he would bang on the floor.
I think I have heard the story actually.
And he would bang the beat of the music out so that the orchestra could follow, which, okay, would be really distracting, but it didn't last that long because he accidentally stabbed himself in the foot and then quite soon after died of gangrene.
Yeah, I think I heard of this because Horrible Histories did a bit at one of the proms one year.
Jean-Baptiste Lully, that was his name.
He came on for the Stupid Deaths bit.
Yeah.
Because he killed himself by conducting.
We've gone on to Lully.
Okay.
Time, the musical. Probably one of my all-time favourite musicals, and it only lasted about a year and a half at the Dominion Theatre.
That's ironic. In
London. Partly because, in fact, it was written by Dave Clark of the famous Dave Clark 5, who wrote probably the most famous piece is called Take 5. Dead. How does it go? Anyway, I think that was it. I'm sorry if it wasn't that piece, but anyway, it was written by him, and there was some famous songs in it. There's one that's just been a version of it been recovered in the Freddie Mercury archives, because there was a lot of famous people on the soundtrack album. Time, the main song called Time was sung by Freddie Mercury. Cliff Richard was on it. Leo Sayer, Dionne Warwick, Julian Lennon, lots of famous-ish people. But anyway, mid-80s, and it was way ahead of its time in that it was. They basically rebuilt the Dominion Theatre in London, which is a massive theatre. It was where We Will Rock You was at when we went to see it.
Right.
But basically at that time in the mid-80s, Dave Clark afterwards has sued the box office of the company that was running that theatre at the time. Because I was thinking, I presume the reason for that is that they've not run the box office efficiently enough to make a success out of a show. But I was thinking that would be a very different proposition back then. Nowadays, if there's a really big show on, bye video people.
Now it's just the dear listeners.
You find out about it online. You book it online. Whereas back then, the only way to get tickets would have been to walk into the box office or to phone up. So if they weren't staffing the box office efficiently, I mean, that place, I think the theatre holds about 2,000 people.
Yeah, and if you wanted to know the phone number and would you have to look at a phone book?
Well, no, because you only had a local phone book. You would have had to phone directory inquiries and speak to the operator.
Oh. See, this sort of stuff is alien to me. I've never actually looked at a phone book for myself.
The operator was 100. You'd call 100 for the operator, which you could do for calling, for making reverse charge calls. If you didn't have any money at a phone box or something and you needed to make an emergency call, you could call the operator on 100 for free and they would connect you to that number. They would ask the person at the other end, do you accept the charges? And if they said yes, you could then talk to them and they would pay the bill, basically. But 192 was directory inquiries. That was the BT run directory inquiries. There then came along lots of different versions of it when they privatised the service, I think. I had to get a phone card when I was at college and you'd buy a £5 phone card and you would use it. You put it in a slot when you used the phone and it would deduct from it. Had a magnetic strip on it. Anyway, where was I? Time the Musical.
Such an old man.
It was fantastic. Look it up on YouTube. There's documentaries on the making of it back then. That basically when you walked in, it was just like a normal theatre, and you'd sit down, and then the show would start, and it would basically be a rock concert. You'd be watching a band play live on a rock concert, but actually, when it started, you were behind the stage, so you were watching the band play as if you were behind the stage looking out. So you were looking at the backs of the rock band, you were behind the drummer, and the crowd were going to be in front, sort of thing. But during the first song, the whole stage revolved so that the band were then facing you. And the whole thing was set up with speakers all around the auditorium so that the crowd would revolve around you sound-wise as well. And then halfway through the third song, there's just this massive explosion of sound and light, and laser beams would hit the stage. The walls, which you thought were just solid walls, would turn into spinning lights, and the whole stage lifted up out of the foundations of the theatre and turned over. With there were the people that were performing on it. I think they'd gone off stage at this point, but there were bits where there were ledges that they could stand on and stuff like this when the stage actually turned vertical and stuff. But basically, they got transported, God knows how many light years across the universe to the High Court of the universe to answer for the crimes of the planet Earth and to justify why humanity should be allowed to continue its existence. And there was this massive kind of prosthetic head thing that came out on stage, which was Akash, the Time Lord. No, he wasn't a Time Lord. He was a judge in the court or something. But that was Laurence Olivier. that played that, and they projected Laurence Olivier's face onto this, so it was like a holographic judge, if you like. It was just this amazing show, just like way ahead of its time. I think it
that was
struggled.
the 80s.
Yeah, mid-80s. I think it struggled because I think it was perhaps too far ahead of the technology that was available.
Yeah.
There were problems that happened. There were some nights where it got bad publicity because the projection of the head would not match up with where the actual head was on the stage, and certain bits of the show didn't work properly all the time. But I saw it 3 times and it worked brilliantly every time I saw it. It just blew me away. But yeah, Time the Musical. Look it up on YouTube. There's plenty of documentaries and stuff of the making of it. It was something else. It really was. There you go. That was the only reason I brought that up was because it was called Time.
Okay.
And there were lots of songs in it about our limited time, which is even more relevant nowadays because a lot of it was about stuff like harnessing the power of the wind and the waves and the sun, you know, and that we don't have that much time to. And back then, that was a fairly unrecognized concept, you know.
Yeah.
Very fringe at the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's another point on time, climate change.
We might be in the end days.
Well, it depends what you mean by end days, because it probably won't mean the end of our species, but it'll mean the end of loads of other species, and it'll mean the end of loads of people living decently. It'll cause loads of problems for humans, but it'll also destroy many thousands more species than we have already destroyed.
It's difficult. It's that perspective thing again, because I'm sort of trying to relate how people are going to look back on our time at the moment in the same sense that we might look back and think, I wonder what it was like to live through the First World War. Or...
Do you mean, like, in a purely, what would it be like to experience that, or in a, why did they think like that back then?
I don't know, really. I mean, I can imagine somebody like me in 100 years' time would be thinking, I wonder what it was like to live through that period in history. And certainly there will be, you know, there's going to be so much historical study done on the period we're going through at the moment.
I mean, this might end up as a historical artifact. That's fun, isn't it?
Hello, people of the future.
You know, a lot of the way that we...
technological archaeology.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. A lot of the way that... I mean, a lot of the stuff is disintegrated now, but we get a lot of our information of the past by reading old manuscripts.
Oh, wow. I just this thought, though, right? Because sorry to introduct you.
Okay.
But you know how an archaeologist might be digging around in caves and be really excited with their helmet torch on when they find like a caveman drawing on the wall of a cave or whatever. Imagine if in a couple of 100 years' time there's a virtual reality equivalent of that in a technological sense, where they've found a way to essentially experience looking around in the digital domain as a physical experience, where you can actually kind of go deep diving into...
By the way, we were watching The Matrix earlier.
The internet archive, if you like, with your virtual reality helmet on, looking around to see what you can find. I'm talking bollocks now, aren't I?
It's
or
just
I'm breaking bollocks.
Necessarily really been necessary. I mean,
necessarily necessary.
Well, the thing is that the reason that we don't know a huge amount about history, I mean, we know things about history, but as you go further and further back, it's more difficult to get it precisely. So, like, we don't even necessarily know the exact year that the historical figure of Jesus was born.
Okay. No.
That's interesting. By the way, on that subject, there's a podcast I quite like recently, although they don't seem to be doing it very frequently. I think I mentioned this guy in our language one, the guy that does Name Explain, and someone else, where they take a look at 10 years of history at a time, starting from 0 AD.
Yeah.
Quite interesting. They're only up to 20 AD at the moment.
Do you know what's weird about this particular current time politically, and I've said this quite a lot recently to different people, is that there is a big difference nowadays, and I'm sure it's because of the media revolution, the media revolution, the technological revolution.
Yeah.
Is that I'm not sure whether or not. I mean, I would think the most controversial political historical period that I've lived through, other than what's happening now, would be the 1980s.
Yeah.
The Thatcher years. And
Tories, bloody divisive.
At that time, and I don't know whether it was my age or the fact that you really only were exposed to the news once or twice a day, that everybody seems to be involved in it now. There's a lot more interest. Everybody seems to be more politically engaged nowadays because of the connectivity, because there is constant news updates coming to people wherever they are. You know, they've got this portal on the world in their pocket. So see, back then, I don't know if it's because at that age I did, but it can't be because I didn't give a shit at that age. It's just that it wasn't as big it wasn't in my face all the time, because I mean, you know, I'd like to think I was at least as intelligent as you, or people of your kind of.
Well, that's the
I
thing.
would have been engaged. You know, it's just that it wasn't.
Yeah,
we were getting on with our lives that weren't the news, and the rest of the day was that. You know, the news was half an hour if you bothered to tune into it. You know,
I mean, there's the fact of the internet, but I don't know. Would you say that time period, the politics influenced you more than this will influence my life? The Brexit would.
I don't know more. I would say it probably influenced it just as much, but I think a lot of it as well is down to where you live. Because, you know, I was in Northamptonshire, which I think is still quite a Tory heartland kind of area. And
I'll certainly leave camp.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I know people and knew people there who had quite vehemently said that if Labour ever got in, they would leave the country.
It's interesting, though, because that seems like an area... I mean, it's not the worst in the country, but it seems like an area that is relatively hard done by politicians.
What, like Northamptonshire kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of just outside of London, where...
I don't know.
There's less people, so they don't get...
To be honest with you, whenever we go down south now, I just feel like it just feels really run down. And I don't know whether or not it's because I've been up here for so long and got used to things being so much better, or if it's actually declined a lot since I lived there. But it just seems like a fucking dump.
Well, it feels like, at least when I went down... Yeah,
there's just rubbish everywhere.
They've got a shopping centre down there, and that seems to be where life there is centred around.
Yeah.
It's where everyone does their shopping, it's where everyone eats, it's where everyone works, really, because it's all that's around.
Yeah. I suppose you kind of get used to whatever's going on around you, but I don't remember it being that...
I did particularly notice that when we visited Blackpool.
Yeah, that was the same.
Yeah,
I mean, it was outside of holiday season, but at the same time, there were a lot of B&Bs that were just closed down and deserted areas.
Yeah, so I mean, it still felt like the 70s there.
Yeah,
but it just felt more depressing.
Yeah,
because there were just so many places that were shut down, and
which is a weird thing because there's an indoor market in Aberdeen. I don't know if you've ever been in there. How well do you know if I tell you where it is? Do you know where Bridge Street is?
No. I don't know any
Well,
of the street names other than
There's
Union Street.
anyone who knows Aberdeen, there's a place called the Indoor Market, and it literally it's like walking into a time warp. You go in there, and it's like walking into the 1970s, but it's not abandoned and run down. It's like it's the thriving 70s. It's like
because it's still got the fucking oil industry.
But it's just a really small pocket, you know. It's like it is literally just a very small shopping centre.
I thought that in Leeds as well, the Corn Exchange. I mean, that seems something really outdated.
That's actually been really updated.
Well, yeah, it's updated, but the name seems really outdated. Corn Exchange.
Yeah. They've got a Corn Exchange in Cambridge. I suppose that's just a historical name, though, isn't it? That's like, I mean, like, you know, there's a street in London called the Haymarket. You know, and there's a lot of places that have Haymarket roads. There's lots of places that have got market streets, but there's no markets there. But it's an interesting. Anyway, should we be wrapping up soon?
There was one more thing. I sort of briefly mentioned it about looking back on history in a moral sense and passing judgment on people that are dead. It's sort of, whilst it's not really fair to judge them by today's standard, because no one can really, unless they are determined to live entirely without a society, they can't completely rid themselves of being under the influence of that society and taking part in it to some extent, even if that would be even if that would be unjust. So it's sort of unfair to judge them in that way. I mean, I say unfair, but they're dead, so they can't really feel bad about it.
The thing is, I suppose there are some interconnected concepts going on there, because not only were laws different, but of necessity as well, so were morals and ethics. I mean, an obvious example of that is Top of the Pops in the 70s, where you saw famous DJs in their 20s and 30s, basically on primetime TV, having teenagers draped all around them, screaming and falling all over them live on TV, you know, that were clearly 13 and 14-year-olds, you know. And you just think nowadays... But it's a weird one for me, that, because I remember living in that world, and at the time, it didn't seem like there was anything wrong going on there. Do you know what I mean? It's an odd feeling to have lived through periods of different acceptability, should we say?
That's the thing as well. I mean, that to me, like I said, is history, really.
Yeah.
But I mean, then there's that sort of thing of realizing how connected we actually are to our history, and how much that influences today.
You can take that to an extreme and think, you know, it's not, in the grand scheme of things, that long ago since the general public would, for entertainment, go to some public place to watch somebody get hung, drawn, and quartered, and cheer and clap, and that would be entertainment.
It was quite long ago.
When I say the grand scheme of things, I'm talking like the history of the human race.
I guess.
It wasn't that long ago. We're only talking a couple of 100 years, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean...
Which is not that long.
I guess something like...
When you think, 200 years would be... I don't know when it actually happened, but something. I say a couple of 100 years. 200 years is basically just over 4 times as long as I've been alive.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I guess there's that.
But then different areas on the planet are going to look at that differently as well, because, you know, there are states in America that still electrocute people.
Yeah, but it's not so much of a public spectacle, and...
No. Although I did
think only 1,000, maybe a couple of thousand people have actually been executed in total recent... not in total, but since the 70s.
I did hear that they're talking about that being not necessarily being more of a traumatic experience for the observers, like the families of the victims. You know, that are there to watch them get.
Loads of the arguments for the death penalty just don't hold up when you actually put them through any sort of scientific trial.
But it does make you wonder about all lots of other things that are more on the borders of, being discussed as morality nowadays. I mean, like, some of this is way past ancient history to some people, but there is debate going on about abortion laws in various different places at the moment. And there's also the euthanasia issue.
Yeah.
Those kind of things which are currently discussed and moved on, if you like, around about our era in history. In a couple of 100 years, they might look back and think, that just seems so alien to us. It's like...
But there is a lot of things about where it's relative to both time and place, because, I mean, somewhere like Saudi Arabia, that would be out of the question. Because
they just opened up tourism.
What?
Saudi Arabia have just opened up... They're changing some of the rules to open up their tourist industry, basically. It's now...
well, it's not that they weren't allowing tourists before, though. It's just that this is more accommodating to tourists, I guess.
I'm not sure. They're allowing visas now that they weren't allowing before. It's a more open kind of... there's certain things, like before, legally, to book a hotel room, to stay in a hotel room as a couple, you had to provide evidence that you were married.
Yeah.
Things like, I think women had to wear... Was it the hijab? I don't know what it is.
No, I wouldn't think so.
I can't remember. You still have to be dressed modestly, but you don't have to be... Or was it head coverings? I can't remember.
Think so.
There's something... I should look this up then, actually, because this has come up in the news recently, so it will be on. But alcohol's still banned.
Yeah, because they were having problems because they could arrest you if you still had alcohol in your blood, and a lot of people were drinking alcohol on the flight over, so were getting arrested when they landed.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that... See, they're inviting non-religious tourists now.
That's surprising, considering they still execute.
Well, this is what I'm saying is... here we go. Saudi Arabia is opening its doors to tourists. They're letting more tourists have visas. Some of the rules governing public behaviour have been significantly relaxed. I mean, it's obviously still a lot more restrictive than... But again, I mean, I suppose what I'm trying to say is that this is an example of time moving on, even in somewhere as what we regard to be as quite regressive.
Yeah, but that's not for moral reasons, though, is it? It's to make more money.
Yeah, I suppose.
Whatever sells, they'll do.
So does this mean that Saudi Arabia... Well, I was going to say, does it mean that they're embracing capitalism? But I suppose they always have, really.
I mean, a lot of people seem to prop up capitalism as this idea of ultimate freedom, but it's used in a lot of places where you wouldn't call it freedom, but it's still...
I think the clue's in the word.
Profit over people.
The clue's in the word, really, isn't it? If you capitalise on something, you're basically taking as much advantage out of it as you can.
So the system's based around capital, whereas something like socialism is based around society getting better rather than profits getting better. Don't know how we got onto that, but...
Same way we usually do. Just talking about
I'm just sort of meaning, I guess, and it'll be different for people. People are entitled to their own views on this, I guess, especially if they're people that are disproportionately affected by this. Like viewing racism or homophobia in the past or in other country, you can see, although generally for the vast majority of people it wouldn't be ideal, there are varying levels of people that would have been more accommodating and people that would have straight up murdered people that they thought were too different to them.
I feel like we could just waffle on for hours if we let ourselves.
Yeah,
but we've gone over a couple of hours. So
it is 11:30.
Yeah, and you've got school in the morning,
and you've got to wake up as well.
Yeah, I've got another beer to drink too.
You got two?
Have I? Bonus.
Plus, I've got half of this.
Well, it is my birthday.
Anyway, I think we should probably wrap it up. We've covered a
let's
lot
do it.
of ground there. I feel like
most of it hasn't been about time, but
Logic's
quite a lot in the
probably
end.
going to stop recording in a few minutes. So we should
and I
probably
desperately need a Pez.
Okay. Anything else to say just very quickly?
I might be releasing an extra. I might be going to a weekly. It's only been my other thing, my Better Call Paul. It's fortnightly normally, but I might be putting one out this week, only a week after the last one. Who knows?
Interesting.
Time will tell.
Oh, also, I think actually
I'm going to wet myself.
this will be the episode after next. We will actually be doing a Halloween special, which is also a podcast.
Ooh.
So we will be doing. I think we're just gonna switch it so that we do 2 1 week, and then we have blanks for the next 2 weeks. I'm not sure. We'll see.
I've got no idea what you're talking about, but all will become clear in time.
Yeah, we'll explain it like when we actually get to the special.
Is it time to stop now?
Yes.
I really need
I've been Fireball,
I'm in the orbiter.
and this has been the Orbiter's birthday.
Oh yeah,
And
I'm well and truly
45
48. 4 dozen.
time.
Wow. In the same amount of time, I'll be 96.
Whom the bell
I really want to make it to 100 years old.
time marches on.
That's Halloween, isn't it?
What?
Halloween.
No, it's Metallica.
Oh, is that a part of that? Because there is a song by Halloween, I think, called Time Marches On. I think.
No, it's part of For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Yeah, I know. That's a line in For Whom the Bell Tolls, but there's also a song by Halloween called Time Marches On.
Well, I guess.
I've got to go because I really need a wee. I'm sorry.
Wait, by a band called Halloween or in the movie Halloween?
Halloween. Halloween is the name of the band.
Okay.
They're very good.
Bye.
Bye.
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast Network.